I think Ilya is just the latest example of this. Elon's another example. Dario's another example. Arguably OpenAI at the beginning, Sam was an example, although like Elon and Dario were at OpenAI early on. So
what do you think they should all do then?
So I think what should happen is some sort of international regulation, or at least domestic regulation, similar to what we described in Plan A.
Okay, so walk me through Plan A.
Yeah. So in this scenario, AI takes longer to get to recursive self-improvement and full automation of AI research than it does in AI 2027. We figured that we should try to illustrate like a range of different possibilities because we do have those sort of uncertainty intervals. So we chose 2030 as the moment when full automation would finally be achieved and things would really kick off. And then working backwards from that, when's the last moment you could really have good regulation? 2029. So in this scenario, AI progress slows down a little bit naturally, and the AI companies keep racing, but they don't quite succeed in automating themselves in 2027 or in 2028 or in 2029, but they're getting really close and they're going to do it in 2030. And then in 2029, the government steps in and regulates them. What regulations do they do? Well, they basically just shut it down temporarily.
Can I ask, how does the elections overlay with your timeframes here? Because there's going to be a big election, isn't there, in 2028? Mm-hmm. And it seems now that sentiment has really, really turned against AI in the general public, and that it will be one of the big ticket items on the ballot.
We think that it'll be maybe the most important issue in the presidential election in 2028. I think a lot of people, most people will be quite concerned about where things are headed. And that's part of why we chose to depict things the way they were doing in this scenario, because that helps explain why they might do this sort of regulation in 2029, is that the voters have been demanding it and the presidential candidates have been promising it.
And in this scenario, and in 2027, would the general public have felt the consequences of AI much more severely than they have now by then?
Yes. Although still, even in 2029 in this scenario, they still mostly have their jobs as depicted here, right? So in 2029 in this scenario, lots of jobs now involve managing AI agents. You mentioned you have an AI agent, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in 2029, in this scenario, the AI agents will be much better. Still though, not enough to just completely do everything. That was the sort of thing that would come in 2030 in this timeline. Again, we're uncertain about timelines. Things could go faster than depicted in this scenario. And in fact, I think things probably will go a bit faster than depicted in this scenario, but we're uncertain. We already did the very fast timeline scenario, so now we're doing a slower timeline scenario. But maybe we should talk about the high level goals. So they want to have AI continue, but in a slower pace.
Who's they?
So they can make it safe. The politicians, the president and the people who voted for the president and, the heads of other governments and so forth. So goal 1, slow things down. Goal 2, make it more transparent so that the scientific community can catch up to this stuff and make more progress. And also so that we don't have to take the company's word for it when they say that their systems are safe and when they say that they haven't, put in any biases into their systems, for example. That's a concentration of power issue. We also want to avoid a situation where there's an intense concentration of power. So in addition to the transparency and the slowdown, we actually think it's actively good for there to be multiple AI companies across multiple different countries that have similar levels of very advanced AI capability, and for there to be like broad diffusion of AI into society rather than, a single mega project that has all the best AIs, for example. And the nice thing about that is you kind of get that by default if you do the first two things. Like if you slow it down and if you make it more transparent, then that means there's breathing room for other projects to sort of catch up, right? And the transparency just like literally helps them catch up because then they can like copy some of the ideas. And then I think the fourth thing would be reversibility. So in what follows in the scenario, we are going to be building up a lot of data centers, a lot of robots. We're going to be transforming the world at a sort of like slower pace, though still a very fast pace, but slower. And if things go wrong and the deal breaks down and everyone starts racing each other again to get to superintelligence as fast as possible, that would be very scary. And so the fourth principle is basically build the new data centers in such a way that if everything breaks down and everyone starts racing again, the newly built data centers get destroyed so that we're sort of back to square one again, instead of in an even worse race where there's even more AIs and robots and compute everywhere. So I can sort of walk you through the timeline if you're interested.
Sure.
Or the president talks to China, talks to the leaders of a bunch of other countries and says, we're going to basically halt AI development until we can figure out a plan for how to do it in ways that achieve these goals. So they basically send inspectors to each other's data centers. Like Chinese inspectors come to US data centers, US inspectors go to Chinese data centers, and verify that they are doing inference and not training.